How did that make you feel, being separated and labeled verbally or non-verbally the bad child?
Well, I believed it for one thing. I didn't understand. We were twins. Why couldn't we do the same thing? If we were twins, why weren't we in the same homes? My adoptive parent that said we were only allowed to talk once a year on our birthdays. And I thought that was my fault, like I had done something wrong. When I was old enough to read, I grabbed the newspaper and found the obituaries because she lived 40 miles away from me. And I knew that the newspaper covered that area and that I knew that would show up if she was gone.
Oh, wow. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Love and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Grace, joined today with Brian Post and Jennique and Opal, twin sisters who were separated through the foster care system, reunited, and we have them both here today. What an honor, ladies. How are we feeling today?
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you all for inviting me.
Yes, I'm so excited. So I had a brief interview with Opal originally to kind of get the story, so I had a better understanding of what really happened. And I would love you to kind of reiterate, that story for us right now.
What had happened is we were talking about the term forever family
Mm-hmm.
and what that means. And I was telling her that when we were 4, we were placed in a group home. And one morning, early in the morning, I was woken up and I was told to get my belongings and go to a car. And when we got we were doing that, I was a little reluctant because we had just said goodbye to my little sister a couple of days before. My twin sister, I didn't even see her that morning. And then I have 2 brothers that were also at that group home. So I was having to literally leave without saying goodbye to any of my family. And the social worker, with all great intentions, said, well, don't you want to go to your forever family? And I was like, well, yeah, everybody wants a forever family. So when I got there, I was all excited to be there. I remember that day, I remember going in and they were all sitting at the stools. And I noticed that it was a family of color. And, which I was down for, that didn't bother me, but it ended up being that a couple months later, I was taken from that home. And then in each home that I went to, I was there longer than I had been in the home before. So I never really understood what that term forever meant. And even Jennique and I were in several homes together, several homes apart.
Mm-hmm.
The day that she went to her adoptive family, she woke me up from a nap, said she was going for a ride in a car. And I said, okay, bye. I'll see you when you get back. And I didn't realize that they were taking her to her adoptive family.
How old were you?
I was 6.
Wow.
And that evening, we were sorting what was hers, what was mine, and what was the biological daughters of the foster family.
Mm.
And the foster mother says, how would you like to stay here until we find your forever family? And I'd already been with the family a year. And my sister just left that morning. So I had no idea that this wasn't my forever family. And she went out of the room and I just started bawling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we weren't allowed to cry. So I ended up smashing my thumb in the door. Not on purpose, but I think subconsciously on purpose. So I'd have a reason to be crying when I went back into the room. And so that term forever was one that I've had a struggle with most of my life.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. What was your young journey going through home to home, coming to and leaving your biological twin? What was that like?
So I was never made such promises of forever family. I was in 14 foster homes in 2 years. And the first time, actually, when Opal left, we both had, because the receiving home, group home place was super full, we had beds in the hallway up against the wall. And I remember waking up and her not being in the bed behind me like she had been before, and not seeing her for a very, very long time. And then, she was placed in that last foster home. The foster home she's talking about was my last foster home before the one I was adopted into. And she was placed there first. I came second. And the rules that applied to her didn't apply to me. Like if she asked for something, and they said yes, it didn't mean that I could have it too. And there were times when I would ask for something, they would say yes, I'd come out to get it, and I'd get in huge trouble because they thought they were saying yes to her. So it was always this comparison, and that I was the bad kid, I was the identified patient or the identified scapegoat. And so anything that happened got blamed on me. It was my idea, even if I was just going along with either her or that biological child. Boink, boink.
How did that make you feel, being separated and labeled in verbally or non-verbally the bad child?
I believed it for one thing. And for another, I didn't understand. It didn't make sense to me. If we were twins, why couldn't we do the same thing? If we were twins, why weren't we in the same homes? When I was adopted, and it was my adoptive parent that said, this is your family now. And so we were only allowed to talk once a year on our birthdays. And I thought that was my fault, like I had done something wrong. And I do remember when I was old enough to read, so about third grade, I grabbed the newspaper and found the obituaries because she lived 40 miles away from me. And I knew that the newspaper covered that area, and that I knew that would show up if she was gone.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's really bringing up a lot of emotion. I could see it on your face. How did you know that that's how she felt, that that's what she was doing while you were separated?
I didn't know about the obituary part, but I had the absolute opposite experience where when they sent her away, they said, oh, she was just too bad. So in reaction to that, I literally had to become perfect. Even to the point where my adoptive mother said to me one day, you are so close to perfect that sometimes I expect you to be. And so that was something that I carried with, to where I couldn't make a mistake. I couldn't do anything wrong, because if I did, that meant I would have to leave the family.
Okay. Yeah. I'm getting... I want to go so deep on this. I also want to kind of talk about, so this was a long, long time ago. The foster care system was so much different. It didn't have the tools it has today. It doesn't have the resources the way that it's coming to. And from what my understanding is that you still kind of work with the foster care system. Is that true still, or what do you do?
I have a master's in social work.
Okay.
I have done foster care social work, but found that it was too challenging for me given my history and so I am actually work for a Center for Independent Living, which means that I work with people with disabilities. I have a disability. For those of you who can't see, it's there. And we are about advocacy, independence. That's each person identifies it. And that can mean anything from actually learning to do the activity yourself, or just getting to pick who does it, how it's done. If I don't want this today, I don't have to have it, like my own choices, and reminding people to talk to the person with the disability rather than to the caregiver or the parent or whatever the case may be, especially with adults who are able to make their own decisions, allowing that to happen. And then, of course, building a community with people with disabilities.
Absolutely. What I feel like you guys have the inside scoop of where the foster system went wrong, right? The parents, these placements sound like they were not educated in how to talk to a young child that is hurting, traumatized, and they're using all these words that are making you guys, you need to feel you had to act perfect, the perfect poster child, so you wouldn't have to leave again. Oh my gosh! And then you're labeled as this bad child, and you're like, I'm not. I'm hurting, and I've lost my sister. How do I just express that safely and not have to leave again?
And
right?
also the disabilities. So,
absolutely.
I was punished so much for my different disabilities that I had, for the way my body worked differently than expected. And my twin story and my disability story feel very much like they're the same story, just different pieces that fit together because of the way I was treated. And I was adopted to at that time, an educator in the special needs. And he was not the right parent for me. Okay. I am also very lucky that I did get the parent for me, which was my adoptive stepfather, who was the most amazing person on the planet. And he's the one actually so the one had said, no, this is your family now. And then when he came in, he actively helped me look. And it took a long time. We had tried the avenue that finally worked. But because he was a lawyer, he had connections. And he was able to find Opal's family and bring us back together again. And I'll never forget it because he came to me one Saturday morning and said, so I think we found her. This is how. Do you want to see her? Well, yeah, duh. Okay. I can't make any promises, but here's the information. I have the information. That was fifth grade.
Oh, fifth grade.
That was fifth grade. We had been separated since first grade. So, and then hadn't seen each other since then. It was in third grade that the one parent left. Sure. Yeah. And we were in foster care for 2 days. And then my mom took us back with the stepfather, who was amazing. And then boink, boink. In fifth grade, so we found each other and we talked. We went on a vacation.
It wasn't fifth grade; it was eighth, because I was already in Oliver.
It was fifth grade. He came to the family. My bad. It was fifth grade. He came to the family. It was eighth grade. We were reunited. That's a lot better with the numbers. Makes so much more sense. Fifth grade, he came to the family. And then in eighth grade, we went on a family vacation and we came back. And it was late at night. It was like 7 or 8 at night when we finally got home. And the first phone call was her. Like the phone was ringing as we were coming in the door, and it was her.
What was that phone call like, Opal?
It was pretty cool because we had gotten the information over the weekend, and I remember calling. It was old school phones, and just going, "Please be home, please be home, please be home."
Yeah. And
then we finally got to talk. It was pretty amazing. And then the story, I wanted to tell 2 stories. One of the stories I wanted to tell was when we actually met. We were facing each other, and we were popping our knuckles at the same time, and we were standing opposite. Sure. So my younger brother was there with us, and he said it was like looking into a mirror sideways. Like we were doing the exact, and we hadn't seen each other in 7 years. So,
9.
Okay, we hadn't seen each other in 9 years. So numbers. So that was a huge difference. But I also wanted to go back and talk about the disability.
Yes, please do.
When I was in, so I have never had good coordination because I have a lazy eye. So in my last foster home, they had me hop on one foot around the kitchen table. And every time I set my foot down, the foster parent would spank me and then continue to try to get all the way around the table on one foot. I never succeeded. To this day, I couldn't do it. So, but just that that feeling was, if you could not do something, it's because you would not do it. And even that carries in today with kids, especially in, a lot of the times you see it in schools. If a child acts out, it's because they're a willful child rather than because they're a traumatized child or they have a limitation.
Yeah. Oh, I want to touch on that.
Even like
sure.
Another piece is hallways. I know this is stupid, but hallways are triggering for me because that was the last place that we were together. The first time we were separated, of course. And because of too long of timeouts in a hallway. And so that's actually triggering for me. I don't like being in a hallway alone by myself. I prefer to have somebody with me if I'm waiting in a hall, or I'll go to like a bigger room or something where I feel more comfortable for that reason.
That brings me to 2 points. One point being, there's a book I want to write, and it's about changing your thinking. And this is hopefully going to drastically change the mindset to alter your physically how you look and how you feel. So I would like you to try, instead of saying this is stupid or this is me being stupid or I'm stupid, you say I'm silly goosing. Or I'm just being a silly little goose. And it changes the lightness of it as it turns it into an act and not a mindset. You know what I mean? And then the other thing I want to touch on is the importance of seeing mental health and disabilities in the foster care system and finding more support for that. How could the foster system do better in the future? Or if you were kids right now in the foster care system, how could you be heard? What did you need them to do instead of spanking you because you put your foot down because you had a lazy eye? That's not you being bad. How could it have supported you with your tics and all of that? Like, what did you need to hear if you were a child today in the foster care system?
Well, the funny thing about it is, because I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I realized, I was like, wow, the foster daughter really seemed to enjoy trying to help me. And I had found her, and she's an occupational therapist. So I literally realized that, number one, I probably was some reason why she went into that field, so that she could help. And I think that's what people need, is they need, what is a I can't and what is an I won't. And there's lots of ways to set up a scenario to where you can figure out if it's an I can't or an I won't. If you say, I bet you can't get around this table once on one foot, and if you do, then it becomes a positive. It's not a negativity, like you're punished if you can't. But set it up as a challenge. I'll race you on one foot around the table, where it becomes, there is no, if you can do it, great. If you can't, that's okay. Let's keep working at it.
Why were they asking you to do that?
Because I didn't have any motor skills. And so they were trying to develop the coordination, but they made it to where, like, even to this day, if I can't do something, it's harder for physically. Now, mentally, no holds there. But physically, if I can't do something, it's really hard for me to challenge myself, because if I can't do something physically, then that makes me, quote unquote, bad.
I think also we can borrow from the independent living movement and the ADA and say, okay, what reasonable accommodation do you need to make this happen? Do you need the support of a person? Do you need to be able to put your hand on the table? What do you need in order to make this happen? Because reasonable accommodation or even just universal design in the first place benefits everyone. It doesn't just benefit that person or that child. Imagine as a foster parent how you would feel if you could celebrate with your child that they finally, for the first time, made it around that table because you were flexible enough to add in a support that made that possible.
Yeah.
It's important. I'm really curious to back up to your mother, both of your mother. What was going on with her when she was pregnant with the two of you?
Oh, a lot. So,
Look at me.
I'm actually going to take this because I did some research later. First of all, she has cognitive disabilities. We don't know if they were biological or if it was because she was hit by a truck when she was very little or a combination thereof.
She was also, the umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck when she was born, so it cut off the circulation to her brain.
Okay.
And then she was hit by a semi truck that clocked her in the neck as well.
So a lot of childhood trauma.
For her. And then he was a genius with probably autism and other disabilities. He grew up in group home as well.
Okay.
And then he while she was pregnant with us, we lived with our paternal grandmother, who actually took her own life at that time. So there was a lot of family stressor happening. And so shortly after that is when they moved. They switched states to be closer to her family instead, because his was no longer an option. So just family stress at that time.
What were the circumstances leading up to placement in foster care?
It was deemed neglect. That's what they took us away on. How
long were you with her?
4. We were taken away at 4
Years old.
4 years old.
Yeah.
So you all were together for 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, and you can't tell a 4-year-old that they don't have a twin. I got a twin. She's about this tall.
Have you seen his face? Yeah. So we were 4 when we were taken away, and we were in foster care. She was in foster care for 2 years. I was in foster care for 3, and then subsequently adopted.
And the story is really far-fetched. I get that. And up until, I'm going to cry, up until Friday, I literally believed we were the only ones with this kind of story. Until I met someone with a similar story who their parent, it was a medical issue. And so they were placed in foster care at the same age of 4. And they were not adopted. They were mostly placed in separate homes. And I think that both are awful. Both are horrific. Separating twins, any siblings, it's tough.
Yes.
But with twins, I didn't mourn my biological parents. I was too busy mourning the loss of my twin.
Your other half.
My other half, like this person who was supposed to help me understand what I looked like and how I interacted with the world, that was no longer there. And the very things of you look this way or that way today, why don't you look better? Well, I don't have my mirror, my built-in mirror to show me that when I when I make this face or I make this mannerism, that this is what I look like, because I didn't have that awareness.
It also made looking in a mirror to like groom yourself would be a traumatic experience, because every time you look in the mirror, you see someone who isn't there.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
That's like on the psychological level of
I
in
mean,
the womb together. Okay.
yeah.
Mm.
But and just learning that the impact for me of just learning that my story was, I wasn't alone, and I wish I had known a whole long time ago, because it felt so personal, like the system was out to get me personally in some way.
They were.
So on Friday, you're saying on Friday you got to connect, or you just learned about a story of a similar circumstance?
I met one of the two twins.
And the similar story. And how was that healing for you at all to meet these people or this person?
Yes and no,
Okay.
because I haven't gotten to hear the whole story yet, and I'm really looking forward to it. I hope I get to. And then, I'm going to try to do it without comparing, because that is, I mean, with twins you compare, and that was the hardest thing when we got together in life, is dealing with each other, is because the whole world saw, ooh, look, twins, they must be just alike. And we're like, this is me and that is her.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't be just like her. So you're just like me. Why don't you understand? Or you're too much like me, go away, because we didn't have those coping skills of how to interact with each other.
There were only two arguments. You're too much like me and you're not enough like me. And every argument was one of those two things.
Okay. Yeah.
How does a 6-year-old navigate the grief and the trauma of losing their twin? Just like out of nowhere. You were told you were going.
I was told she was going for a ride.
And you were told you were going to the store?
I don't remember. I was told to say goodbye to her.
And
Before
no
you
other
left.
explanation.
No other real explanation. I saw the big box, so I kind of figured it out, because I'm 6 and had this experience.
Did it take for it to set in that she was gone?
Well, for me, it was when it didn't take long, because as soon as I was awake, and they said, "Do you want to stay here until you want your forever family?" So I lost. I mean, in one day, I lost everybody I knew that was part of my family or constructed family. I lost them, even though I was still in that home for another year. They weren't my family anymore.
Yeah.
And so I lost all of my family in one day. And oddly enough, that's not the only time. I've had that feeling where I've lost everyone that I know about, everyone that I care about in one day. And to be told that, to have no guarantee that you'd ever even talk to that person again, there was no guarantee of that. Because in the other homes where we weren't together, we didn't have contact. So that was something that I think should have been done better, was to make sure that we had that contact. The other thing we were talking about is there were at least 4, if not more, families that were willing to keep my sister and I together. And it was the system itself that decided no.
Wow. Jennique, how about for you?
A lot of things went through my head, and now I don't know where they are right now. She's right. There were a lot of homes that wanted both of us, and the feeling of being the one. Oh, I can do this without crying. Knowing that you were the bad kid and you were the reason why you weren't together. That's a powerful message to be told. And then at one point, my family was investigated before my adoption for child abuse. And the social worker said to me, "Do you want a different home?" And I started to speak, and they said, "Not with your sister." Well, I don't care. And for me, every home had treated me pretty much the same way. That's the big thing, is that there was a lot of abuse in foster homes in our era. And I'm really glad that there's a company like Leaf that can support families so that doesn't happen. So for me, it didn't matter. If you weren't going to put me with her, I didn't really care where I was going or what happened.
And you couldn't ask because they said not with your sister.
Not with your sister.
Yeah. So
they literally said
they
that
just shut it down.
didn't matter.
They just shut it down.
It didn't matter anymore because it wasn't going to be with her. And it was then, I think that was when I realized that I was not going to be with you ever again.
Yeah.
And I was in first grade when that happened.
And they expected to go to school.
And they asked a 6-year-old about their own placement.
And why?
Or 7.
Why? What had happened that they asked?
I've tried not to. But
My bad.
I was burned. I was burned by one of my parents. And so they called me into the office at school and taking pictures of that burn. And it was during that conversation that they asked me if I wanted to go back, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter because I couldn't be with her, and she was 40 miles away from me,
and we weren't allowed to have
it. And we knew it. And I mean, mine was the bigger town of the two, and so it was all the time that somebody would come and say to me, "I saw you at the pool, or I saw you at the store, or I saw you here or there. You were rude." I'm like, wasn't even there. And it was her and former foster parents of hers and of mine, and if the same would stop me. I saw her parents one time, and they got mad at me for not being in the car. And knowing that she was in the parking lot of the store that I was in, not realizing at the time that that's who that was.
My parents came out and said, "Oh, we saw your sister. She was in the store." And it's like, okay, that was TMI, because to know that she was in the store, and if we'd have been allowed to go in the store, I'd have gotten to see my sister.
Like a Lifetime movie.
Yeah, it's
less believable.
I was gonna say the same thing.
I want to watch this episode. Wow. Oh my! And you weren't allowed to have contact.
No.
So, I feel like the little girl in me, if I was in any one of your shoes, I would have been like, "Screw you," and I would have took off running to find me, right? To find my other half. Did that thought cross any of your minds?
For me, I couldn't do that because that would have taken away the perfect child.
Okay.
So I was too perfect to be able to do something like that. My brother ran away to find our older brother who lived with her. He was able to do that, but because so he did that. He ran. Well, we don't call it that he ran away. We call it that he tried to run too. And that was when my parents really realized the support that we needed, that there was still so many hurts and wounds from that.
My brother also tried to run away. He was not met with the love and support of, "Oh, there must be a problem here." And so, of course, and my younger sister also sometimes ran away. So for me, it was better I was the quiet, try to be out of sight, out of mind. And when I first was in college, they called me Mouse because I was quiet and blended into the woodwork, because that was what was safe for me. I am not that's not my natural personality at all. But that's what I did in order to stay safe.
No, it makes perfect sense. And to Grace's point, there have been a lot of kids who've gotten stressed out and scared or worried and taken off running, not having a clue where they were going.
Mhm.
They just run. I'm going to go. I worked with a kid who would get scared in the middle of the night in Vancouver, Canada. He was 10 years old and he'd bolt and run. And I finally asked him, "Where are you running to?" He said, "I'm going to my mom." He didn't know where he lived.
Where she lived.
He's just stressed and scared. So
Yeah.
it's a very intense story the two of you share. I grew up with a friend who had twin sisters, and so I think about how close they were, and then to think about the two of you being separated, and not just separated, but suppressed, not allowed to grieve, not allowed to express the pain that you felt, and so just carrying one trauma after the next trauma after the next, and because Opal's on the team, haven't had the experience of sharing in some of her grief work that she's done, and knowing how valuable that would be for you as well. And I want to extend an open invitation anytime we're doing intensive work that you want to come and work with her and the two of you heal some of that together. I really want to encourage it. Because I want to point out that you were talking and those tics were kicking in, and it was the first time in the since we've been sitting down here, but they were getting pretty bad. And old Paul reached over and touched her back, and it went away. And so it's just that just really speaks to the oxytocin bond between the two of you, and the support and regulation that occurs. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I really want to encourage that, Jennique, because I think it can really help settle that's just a lot of trauma.
In your nervous system.
Tics and things that is a lot of trauma that's just never, and it's trying to get out. It's the same thing that Peter Levine, who really pioneered shock trauma therapy. You have shock. You guys have experienced a lot of shock. Saying to your sister, "Bye, I'll see you later," and she disappeared.
Yeah.
This is your not just your other half, but your other half. It's like half your body just left. And
That's true.
And to say that you look in the mirror and that person is not there, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that. Yeah. I can't. And
so
how
there's
many twins?
There's a thing for twins that where one dies, and it's called a twinless twin. And we experienced that twinless twin with the other person being alive and having to go through the same grief process with the other person being alive and never knowing if you're going to see that other person again or not.
And being in the third grade and looking in the obituaries, because that's where you would find your sister if she was dead.
Oh my God.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's there's so much there. Like, this should be a Lifetime movie. I know someone.
I'm writing a book.
We'll get you connected.
Yeah, we need to do that. But let's fast forward through all this pain, this grief, all of this loss, because what the right hemisphere, the emotional brain, doesn't get, the left hemisphere compensates for.
Right.
So I know Opal. I think Opal's a genius. I think what she's doing with IEPs and helping kids and parents, I think it's amazing. I can only imagine that in your work, you are a real catalyst and change agent. Let's talk about how you've taken so much pain and you have directed into the places that you've directed it.
Jen, I'd like you to share about the GRE.
Oh. So I was in special ed because of physical, which nobody hears about that. That's a thing. Especially then it was right after IDEA.
Special ed or physical special ed?
Physical special ed is a thing nobody knows about.
Thank you for clarifying.
And then in third grade I tested out of it. I was close enough to average. In fact, we learned when I took an IQ test in college, what I could do and what I knew were very disparaging. Like, we're talking 20 points difference, which shows a learning disability, except she didn't want to label it as a disability at first because what I knew was so much higher than what I could do. And I said to her, well, wouldn't that just be the opposite kind of disability? And she said, you're right. So I actually had to advocate that I had a disability in order to get services in school, in college. And so I actually don't want to do the GRE. I want to do 5th grade.
Oh, yes,
I
that's a
had the
great one.
most amazing teacher in 5th grade. Same last name as me now, which I love, Mrs. Lee. She was awesome. And she recognized that same disability. And before the ADA, she said to me, here's the booklet. I don't want you to fill out these things, the scantrons, where you have to fill in the bubble in the right place. I want you just to write your answers in the book. Okay, you're sure? I mean, you're not supposed to do that. She said, I know you're not supposed to. Go ahead and do it. And then she switched it onto the Scantron. And given that the spelling was so below that it was obvious that she had given my answers. And I want to make that clear because my scores went from below average to post high school, the highest scores you could get, because it was just a vision and a motor skill disability rather than intellectual.
She adapted it. She was smart. She was smart enough to know that you were smart.
Yes.
And that actually, her words when we talked about it later was that my reaction was, you mean I'm not, and I used the R word.
Yeah.
Because that's how I saw myself. Because that's how I had been treated with special ed, and that's what the kids called me on the playground.
What a moment. What a moment.
Wow.
What a moment.
And
You tell us her GRE story.
she got a perfect score on the analytical part of the GRE. That's just it. She got a perfect score on the analytical part of the GRE. For me, we had in high school, we had a team, and it was called Academic Decathlon. And it was 10 subjects, and you took tests in it. I was invited onto that team for Academic Decathlon. And that was, even though my grades were C's, because I didn't have the ability to sit there and be able to do all the homework. If I'd have had, one of the things that we give now is shorten assignments to focus on mastery. If I'd have been given that, I would have had straight A's. But that, I did speech contests and academic decathlon in high school, and those were the things that allowed me to shine as where I was intelligent. And as a matter of fact, my teacher and academic decathlon coach was the editor for my book. And that's showed that even with any difficulties, my senior year, they weren't going to let me take the advanced English. And they made me test into it. And I tested into it based upon remembering what I had read, even though it took me longer to read it. I have really good memory once I read it.
One thing that both stories show, and with my adoptive stepfather, Fred, who was amazing, what it shows is that each child needs somebody, whether it be a teacher, an adoptive parent, somebody who will come alongside them and see them for who they are, for who they will be, and help them make the transition, and believe in themselves that they can do it and that they will someday be where they want to be. I mean, 20 years ago, I wrote a sheet about Jen's ultimate career. I found that paper last week. All but one thing on that sheet is part of my career. And when I shared that with a coworker, they said, "Oh, we'll add that, and here's how." So it's going to be 100% will be.
That's amazing.
And I believe every kid can get there. Every person can get there. That's what independent living is for. That's what agencies like LEAF and foster parents and adoptive parents, that's what you're for, is to help that kid know they're not alone in the world. And they can be whatever they want to be.
Right.
We gotta end on that note.
That was beautiful.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Let's put a pin in that. Let's put a pin in that. Oh my gosh. Well, look forward to the Lifetime movie about these two. I cannot wait. Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing such an intimate story of the resilience between twins and how important it is that siblings stick together. Am I right? Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Brian, for those deep questions. Again, if you guys enjoyed this episode, join us next time for another episode of the Love and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Grace, co-host Brian. Thank you, ladies, so much for coming on, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. Bye, guys. Thank you.